Hello and welcome back to the Engine Room podcast. My name is Frederik and I'm your host. Today we're doing a little bit of a meta episode, if you will. So we're doing a podcast about how to use podcasts in your marketing. And for that, I brought our in-house expert on podcasts. I don't know if that's a stretch. I did bring an expert in marketing. This is Matt, our growth lead and UK country lead. So Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. You've been here loads of times, so I don't think that I'll do the typical introduction. So I would much rather just get into the meat of it, right?
Yeah, man.
Podcast is, and for a long time has been, talk of the town in B2B. Is it still that? Do you think so?
Yeah, it's one of those ones where we have like hype cycles, don't we? Yeah. Where it's like, what's the big hype cycle at the moment? And I think like post-COVID, like there just seemed to be like a big movement in like 22, 23, where it was like everyone needs to do a podcast. And there was quite like fundamental thinking about like everyone's trying to articulate what they thought the most value out of a podcast was. Like there was a lot of frameworks about how it's the engine to inform content for social, and you can use it across multiple channels, hero asset into children assets, as it were. So like it's sort of faded away, but probably not for the right reasons, because the hype cycle moves on to something else. But there's still huge relevance in it, and I still think it's hugely important given the way our market is changing at the moment, the way LLMs are coming in and looking for multiple sources. So there's huge benefits still to the podcast format. It is. I'm not going to proclaim anything is dead.
No.
At this
Nothing
stage.
is dead. Yeah, and that's right. I think there was a period with I think around COVID, and like everybody and their mother, they had to have a podcast, right? And we still see it a lot. And there's also a lot of podcasts that just sucks, to be completely fair. So what I'm hearing you saying is also like, even though you don't have a podcast now, that ship necessarily hasn't sailed. It's just a matter of making sure that there's still some quality to it, right?
Yeah. This is the thing, the question is, why am I creating a podcast if you're thinking of creating a podcast? Because we now are in an environment where there are more podcasts than there's ever been in the history of human life. So, okay, how do I stand out and for what reasons? And there's lots of different plays you can do here that support different, I would say, marketing objectives. But I'd definitely be asking the question as like, why are we doing it? And then what does success actually look like? Because if you're looking at single metrics like raw downloads, that's just not a thing anymore. So it's got to be part of an integrated, broader marketing strategy.
I obviously agree. And you're actually touching upon kind of where we need to go into. So before you start and launch your podcast, what are some of the, maybe not things to consider, but what are some of the benefits that you think a company could get out of, launching a podcast? What are some of the things that you would look to gain or gain from having a podcast?
Okay, I wouldn't even go near performance of a podcast as like what I would expect out of it. So that I've already kind of mentioned like the downloads and things like that. I would be looking at real top of funnel, like, okay, do I need to tell a bigger story, and what's a format that allows me to do this? So it's not just top of funnel. I suppose I should actually kind of re-articulate that as brand building. Like, how do I take my brand out there? How do I really build a story? What's an effective mechanism? So looking from a pure creative studio perspective, a podcast is a really effective mechanism to create one asset every 2 or 3 weeks, depending on the frequency, and creating a huge bank of content which I can use to play elsewhere. And I think before I even talk about the atomization of it, like the huge value is just it's just having something that's really authentic. Like, we're now in a world where AI content's going to start coming in a lot more. We see that coming in just written form, in video form as well. So like the power of real human beings telling real stories is still so big.
Yeah.
And a podcast isn't just an audio format, it's a video audio format, and it just gives you the ability to be flexible in a really smart production way, and then create lots of things out of it. So before you even think about what is the impact on brand and measuring ROI of doing it, this is just a great way of creating lots of content from a singular starting point.
Yeah, I obviously agree. Some of the easy pushback to give on that is but our company doesn't necessarily have a story. Then we can't create a podcast, right? So let's take it doesn't have to be this example, but like you would call it a dry product, infosec or whatever. Is there a good story to tell about every business?
It gets harder when there's lookalike businesses, but like this is where the podcast might be too soon. Like that's where like if I'm in the marketing team there and we're like we haven't got a good enough story, then I kind of need to revisit like what's our mission statement? Why do we exist? What's the purpose we serve? And everyone, like the CEO, should still be laying out a it's our mission to be the most reliable partner in InfoSec. That's a problem we've identified in the market. Okay, then how does that filter down into a story and understanding pain points? So maybe you have to go, if you're not ready for a story, then you have to go and figure out what the story is. What are the main talking points in the market? What does your audience care about the most? Is there like a kind of a weird trail of like developers who talk about something regularly on Reddit? You can tap into like newsjack against different stories, and like you find a way of fitting into the conversation. It's probably a nicer way to articulate it.
I think I would tend to agree with you, but I will also disagree with you a little bit because I think if you don't have a story to tell, then you probably shouldn't have a business either, right? Because I think like that's the way I see it anyway. You start a business because you spot a problem in a market, like you're very into a market or into an industry, and you spot a problem here that you think you can solve in a new, better, faster, whatever, in a new and different way, right? That's why you start a business, not because you're going into, you said, a lookalike category or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think if you can't sit down and say like, well, I can articulate a vision for the category. I can articulate a vision for, maybe an industry or a vertical that I think can update or be, challenged in some fundamental way. Then you probably need to look at why did you start a business in the first place. And if you started the business because you could see something like, okay, there's an easy way to make a lot of money on IT consulting or whatever, fair game. But then you're also not ready for the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. I completely agree. It's all right. If you haven't got a business story, then what is the business doing? It's a confidence thing at that point. If you're not sure what you're doing as a business, then stop. Don't create content. You're not ready.
Yeah, I think so. All right. So one of the interesting things you said before I went on this little tangent is podcast is not necessarily a performance strategy. It's more so a content strategy. So it's a way. Was that right? Yeah. So how do you see that play out as maybe a vehicle for, or like an enabler for the rest of the marketing strategy?
There's a few things that are like coming together at the same time at the moment in terms of a content strategy. So your content strategy more than ever actually has to overlook 2 or 3 different channels. Like we can't look at channel strategy as a separate thing. So sometimes we look at LinkedIn as a strategy or search as a strategy. Like the way I'm going to give market context before I go back to the content strategy, but the way things are changing is like LLMs and AI overviews are multi-sourcing, they're multi-threading information. So the way we do search and social is going to change fundamentally, increasingly over the next few years. So straight away, like your content strategy now has to be a multi-thread strategy. It's like, how does one story, one consistent message appear in 4 or 5 different places? So when people are researching me, they're constantly hearing the same message in a clear and concise way. And like podcasting is one method of doing it. The other, I would kind of put together 2 or 3 different things in like a hero content category, which means I can then multi-thread that. So podcasting is one way, is like high quality video might be another way of doing different bits and pieces. And there might be more traditional routes where it's research reports, white papers, primary stuff, and that can all kind of feed in. But that's one mechanism of taking it out into a broader strategy that goes across different channels. So I would always look at it as a hero piece and then figure out, okay, where do I want to play it? Where does it need to go?
Nice. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. So now we've been talking about why should you even do a strategy like a podcast? Should you have that? How can you repurpose it into content, right? Let's say we figured out there is a story here to tell.
Mm-hmm.
What do I then do? How do I go about it then? Now I sit down and I've decided I'm going to do a podcast. What are some of the things that I need to consider?
So it's the storytelling is obviously the primary focus. Like, what's the what's kind of the zeitgeist of your market. Like, where do we think we've got an interesting angle? Because you do have to do your competitor analysis and go, well, there's a lot of other people with content out there and messaging and podcasts. Like, if I'm going to create another content marketing podcast, how the hell am I different from the other 200, 300, 400 content marketing podcast and actually get like views and visibility? So you have to figure out your own tiny zeitgeist and try and make sure it's actually interesting enough for people to engage with it. So that storytelling piece is crucial, but you also need really good people, because you're selling authenticity, you're selling people. Because I'm not just going to, there are AI podcasts, but Jesus Christ, no, don't do that. Like, you are going to try and buy into the people. So have you got, it's such a cheesy phrase, but have you got that thought leader, that's perhaps more charismatic individual who can really clearly articulate your story, the problem you might solve, or the particular view you have on a marketplace in a clear and authentic way? And have you got a way of them not just running that narrative, but like, controlling each of the episodes, building strong stories and structures, inviting in relevant guests, and keeping things fresh and exciting? So yeah, it's the story piece, and then it's also like, have I got the ability to deliver that before I get anywhere near production? And like, we all love to go straight to the end and go, what lighting should I have? And what's the best camera? But like, no, you need to make sure it's actually compelling, engaging content, and it's people and narrative.
Yeah. Let's say you don't have the charismatic CEO. How would you still maybe this is a very like edge case, but I think it's still maybe interesting to kind of explore. Let's say you decided podcast is the right thing for you, because you do have maybe you do have a CEO that has the vision, that is visionary, and that has a view on the category and all that, but they don't want to do that. Do you jump in front of the camera as the head of marketing, or how would you go about that?
That's a really tough question.
I'm aware. Here we ask the tough questions here, right? This is the engine room, and we need to figure that stuff out.
But there must be someone that you'd hope to find someone else in the organization who understands the business well enough and the product well enough to be able to, like, I can articulate this. There's going to be the extrovert there. It might have to be from marketing or sales, someone who can take that story out there. But it doesn't always have to be the CEO, but it can just be a figurehead. And there's plenty of companies that will do that. I'm sure we can find some good examples as well, that it's not. Sometimes the CEO is actually quite a quiet retiring. The statistics on the quiet retiring CEOs are the most successful ones, rather than the all out there guy. So it doesn't have to be the guy or girl who's got the biggest voice. But you might have to find someone for the podcast who does have that ability to strike a good natural conversation and keep it engaging, even if it's not the top person.
Yeah, but I think that's a great point, because that is most often case the time, right? You don't sit with the CEO, especially if you're in SaaS, right? You would typically have like a technical founder that kind of saw a problem and did all that. They're not necessarily interested in jumping on a video podcast, and then being a face of the company. They're not necessarily comfortable with that. And that's, if you like create a successful podcast, especially with all the redistribution things you talked about, like repurposing and all that, they're going to become the face of a company, and that might not be super interesting or desirable for them.
But do you know what? This is the crazy thing. This is just reminding me. Did you see the job advert by PayPal?
No.
So PayPal put a job advert out where they're literally hiring people to manage the content of the CEO. It's like a $200,000 job.
Right.
And there's more and more discourse that, like, the next big marketing strategy is around like leader content. So even if that person might be a bit of an introvert or not particularly used to it, there's companies who are building mechanisms where, like, we'll find a way of making you a person who has to be the complete lead on this, because people are buying people more than anything. People are brand. And there's a lot of stories that your next marketing leader is almost people are hiring branded leaders who have got big LinkedIn profiles, big social profiles, have their own newsletters and things like that, to be the next CMO, regardless of the other qualifications. So there's huge, like, you kind of have to get out your comfort zone and be like, if that's where my career trajectory wants to go, like, do I have to start just forcing myself into it?
I think the extreme of that is, do you remember that Hawk Tuah girl?
Yep.
She was hired
Hayley something.
Hayley Welch, yeah. She was hired as like on the press team in the White House, right? Yeah, a couple of weeks ago. That's like, so that's the extreme of that, right? I don't know. It made me think of that. It's really good.
She's got her own podcast, Talking to Her.
I know, and she's got a big brand, right? And now she is also on the press team for the White House, right? I don't know. So that's a little bit on the side, but that's so I believe it, and we're also seeing it with the whole thought leadership movement, right?
Yeah.
We do see it a lot, and we see, if we have founders or like executives or just people in the business that are driving a lot. That's also what we experience here, right? We have big brands here that have managed to drive a lot of the demand for Sparkforce as well. And the same thing we see for the clients with LinkedIn have rolled out thought leader ads. So I really believe that like leader content and that way is gonna go. And then if you are charismatic, this is an easy way to create a lot of that, right? All right. So what's your opinion on? So let's say we're still gonna do a podcast. What's your opinion on like guest episodes versus like solo episodes or like internal episodes? What are your thoughts on that?
If I were looking for like a good podcast, I'm always looking for profile I'm always going to find a guest episode slightly more interesting. And let's look at it from two different angles. One is like I'm a viewer or a listener just looking for advice on stuff, and I'm kind of going through all the different podcasts. If I see a name I recognize, like Gaetano, the guy in Miami, like he's just incredible on SEO. Kevin Indig, anytime he's doing a podcast, I'm listening to that because I respect that person's insight, their own research and opinion. So like, if there's the relevant stakeholder in your industry who's got a bit of a profile, like fight for that person and be like, we'd love to have you on the podcast. Let's talk about whatever research you're doing, and like, because that will draw people in, and you can thread it to your own, whatever narrative as well that suits you guys. So one, there's a big benefit of doing that. The business benefit for you is sometimes you can build relationships with people who are good for your business. It could be potential clients, it could be potential partners. It means you can meet people who you kind of want to meet, and you're like, I'm going to learn from you, or we might end up doing some business together later on. Because like those personal connections is what actually sells more than anything. And if you can strike up a conversation in a nice way like that, that's pretty cool. Internal podcasts, which I know is exactly what we're doing now, sometimes can be a bit scary if there's too many of them. Is this just a sales pitch? Have you just dressed up a sales pitch to me for 40 minutes on why I should buy your product, your agency, whatever it may be? So you have to have that blend. Yeah. It's nice to get internal perspectives because it shows the intelligence of different people in your teams, and someone who's really deeply engaged in researching you might be like, I kind of want to hear how they think about social or search, but you don't overdo it. A blended strategy is what I'd recommend.
Right. I agree with you, because I think if you're relying, that's something that I'm thinking about with podcasts. If you're relying only on guests, then you aren't able to drive your own narrative, and that obviously again depends on the podcast, right? You take something, whatever, Joe Rogan or Lenny's podcast or some of all those podcasts that is very guest driven. It's not necessarily because they have an agenda they want to push. But then if you come in as a company, we want to push an agenda, right? We have a particular view on marketing. That's an agenda we want to push. And you see it potentially, that's the same thing you would want to do if you're listening to this and you're considering doing your own podcast, you're working internally at a company, you might have a view on the category that you then want to push. And then it becomes a problem if you only get guests, right? All right, I think that's interesting. And the added benefits also of building relationships, I think that's an interesting one.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so you said we shouldn't measure this podcast on downloads or subscribers. No. But at some point, your CEO or CFO is going to come and tell me, we're investing in this podcast. What is the ROI?
Never look at it as a single channel performance piece. Like, never, ever, ever. Like, I actually think this is the best thing that's happened from AI. Like, starting to change how we look at search and how we research stuff. Like, this has been what I think people have been doing this for years, but for some reason we always looked at things in silos. So AI is literally forcing us to distribute content across multiple platforms. it's going to be pulling from Reddit, it's going to be pulling from YouTube, it's going to be pulling like Instagram have just opened up their walls. So now I can crawl Instagram as well. Like there is an element of LinkedIn that it can grab, I think, if you do like pulse posts and things like that.
Okay.
So it's pulling from lots of places as well as your own website. So like you kind of need your story absolutely everywhere at the same time. So to be really simple about measurement, you're looking at reach and engagement, and you just have to kind of bundle it together in the most simple way for your CMO, one of your directors, and go, look, we created this podcast, we've distributed it over 5 different channels, it also appears in search. Here's the amalgamated view. We reached 5,000 people in our audience last week, of which the engagement was, view engagement is kind of interesting, but there's other ways of looking as well. Like we're also capturing on sign up forms. Have you heard about us? And someone's going to say a podcast, or I found one of your clips on Instagram and things like that. There's different ways of doing it. There's no whole attribution thing. There's no perfect attribution. It does not exist. But you just need to go, I am visible. I am reaching as much of my audience as I possibly can with the smallest, because it's always the smallest amount of resource that I can be given. If you give me more resource, I can reach more people. But show your exposure of the brand. This is why we're doing it. It's a brand play, and I'm reaching as many people as I can. Keep it simple.
Yeah. And then I think another hidden aspect of it is you touched a little bit on it with the AI overview and the way it's pulling from everything. It's just an easy, elegant way to create content for a lot of channels, right? And instead of you would have to sit down and create snippets or content for YouTube, and then for social, and then for Instagram, and then for LinkedIn, and you create it once, and then you are able to generate it into a lot of different pieces, right? Not just video, also written, and I think that also needs to be a part of the ROI conversation, if you're asking me.
100%. I think the biggest problem we're going to see in the last couple of years is, in the next couple of years, is we've not built content teams to do it like this. I think this is the best way to do it, and I'm excited about where that's going to go. But we've built content teams in silos. So search sits over here, PR sits over here, social sits over here, and they're all doing different things. And they're all vaguely connected. But we need to think so much more holistically. There needs to be really good planning at the top, campaign planning. This is our story. Here's how here's how it's distributed in a clear, consistent way. And it's not just creating different formats and different channels. It's multi-threading off of one format or 2 formats and making sure it's consistent in different places. So many teams aren't set up for that. They're too siloed. It's going to be a huge challenge for a lot of tech companies, especially the ones that maybe are a little bit more stuck in their ways, a little bit more mature.
Yeah.
That's my big take.
Is there a big take? Nice. Is there any companies who shouldn't do it? Right? I know we touched upon the ones who might not have a story, but is there any this, I don't know, company, type of company, whatever, should just never do a podcast?
Yeah. There probably is.
Yeah.
It could be it depends on your resource sometimes. That's, again, it's a really good question, is if you haven't really got the resource to properly distribute it, then you shouldn't do it. You have to have it, again, it's so back to the strategy, is how effectively can I reach my audience by doing this? Yeah. How big is my audience? If your audience is a total addressable market of, 1,000 companies, you probably don't need to bother. You could use it and kind of multi-thread from there, but it's down to the strategy. How big is your audience and how much resource have you actually got to do it? You might not be the right company to do it. Also, if you're in a saturated market we're another new content agency creating a new content podcast, you're fighting a tough battle. Yeah. Why are you trying to fight 500, 600 people who have come and done it before you, probably a lot better than you as well? It's relevance as well, if I was to add something in. Resource, relevance, and audience is the 3 things on my head.
3 R's, right? Relevance, reach, and audience.
Audience.
No, but that was what I was fishing for, because it's also a matter of knowing your audience, right? Yeah. If you have a audience that exclusively listens to cassettes, you probably shouldn't do a podcast, right? And they're an analog audience or whatever, right? You probably shouldn't do the podcast. All right, Matt, we're coming up on time here, but I want to have your 3 biggest takeaways on how to do a podcast the right way.
Three biggest takeaways. Has to be part of a holistic strategy. Don't do it in isolation because it won't work. It needs to be multi-threaded across all your content teams and how you do SEO, how you do social. And it needs to be a driver, one of the key drivers of like hero content across that. So yeah, it has to be part of a bigger strategy. It's kind of going back on where we just went, but are you the right company to do this? So have you got the right type of audience who consume that type of content, who are searching in that type of way, who are consuming social stuff? What's my third one?
Commit to it long term.
It's consistency, isn't it?
I think
How
so.
many podcasts never make it past episode 5 or 6?
I don't know, but I know the stat of if you've done more than 20 episodes of your podcast, you're in the 1% of podcasters.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they all like to say, the podcasters at least. I haven't like critiqued that stat, but like that's the stat that gets thrown around, right? So
why is that a drop off? Is it the management of expectations? Is this someone not communicating properly to a director or a CFO going, we're going to get ROI from this? Because you're not. It's a brand play.
I think it's a brand play, and I think it's an authority play, right? To get into become like an authority, leading authority in your industry, and like have a vision of and view of the category. But I think it is that people go like, okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to create podcast, and then I'm going to set up the video cameras. I'm going to have going to clip it up, and then I'm going to go super viral, and I'm going to get to like 1 million downloads a month or whatever, right? And that's not how it goes, right? So if you and you've said this so many times, if you view podcasts in isolation as like, what is the ROI on my podcast? How many form submissions do I get from my podcast? Then you're gonna fail, right? But if you view it as like the hero piece, I really love that framing of it. It's the hero piece of my content strategy, and everything that I create, my Instagram, my TikTok, my Facebook or whatever it's called now, and my LinkedIn, and then my blog and my newsletter, and like my Quora, my whatever Reddit, the whole thing. It ties back into whatever subject that I took care of that week on my podcast, right? I think if you view it like that, then, and if you just, let's say you also just divide the cost out across all the content pieces that you get, it's actually, that ROI calculation becomes vastly different, because you get 1 million impressions for all of that, and you spend, I don't know, whatever. Now we spend half an hour on this, right? So I think if you view it in isolation, and I think that goes back to the consistency, right? I think that's it.
I think the way to look at it, if you're selling it, if you're trying to sell, I want to do a podcast, the reason we're doing this is because we want share of voice. And that is when people talk about our little industry, let's call it cybersecurity, when they talk about cybersecurity, they search it, they consume content on it, our brand is always there because we want share of voice. That is the new world we're in. This is a way that we can get there.
I agree. And I think share of voice, and then also the authority part, right? You mentioned the one with PayPal, right? So leader content.
Yeah.
People buy from people, and it's more prevalent in B2B than it is in B2C. People buy from people, and if we see somebody here from this company that we trust and that has like a differentiated point of view on things, I think that's, I know that's going to drive a lot for you. So I think, yeah. All right, Matt. Thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking podcasts.
You are welcome.